Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We've got some exciting legislation to sign. And so to kind of talk a little bit more about both bills that we're going to sign today, I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Tim Keller.
All right, well, good morning, or I should say good afternoon to everyone, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We are gathering today more virtually than we have been in the past for a couple of reasons: holiday travel and goings-ons, and also just with COVID back in the air. I also want to mention, because people might be able to hear, I've got a little bit of a head cold, have had 3 negative tests, knock on wood, so I feel good about that. But yes, I'm a little congested. So I'm also excited that we're able to do this today, albeit virtually. We have 2 pieces of legislation to sign, actually, and I do have the actual pieces here with me, and we'll be signing them officially. And then we'll hand them off to go over to the clerk's office a little bit later. So I would just really intro by saying this. First, also welcome to everyone for joining us today. And we're going to talk a lot about our Councilor Senna and the wonderful work she's done. But this particular bill we want to begin with respect to language accessibility. Councilor Senna has been passionate about this from day one, and even before she was appointed to the council. And she's worked with our Office of Equity and Inclusion and our Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs on this issue. And then now, as councilor, is able to really institutionalize it through ordinance. And that, of course, is a huge step towards lasting, meaningful change on this issue that has plagued our city for a long time. And so we know that folks basically need services from the city who may or may not be fluent in English at the end of the day. And that's something that we've known for a long time, but unfortunately, for all those kind of institutional barriers that we put up against folks who don't speak English as a first language, we're trying to correct that in some small way with this by making sure that the city is committed to equitable and inclusive practices, especially when it comes to language access. And so I think the best thing would be to hear more from the advocates and the councilor on this important issue. But this is about breaking down barriers created by language. And so I'm honored to sign this today. So with that, I'll hand it back over to our moderator, Danielle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so as Mayor mentioned, these 2 legislations were kind of guided by our Councilor Senna, who we're going to hear from in just a second. But I also want to make sure that we thank the sponsor of the language access bill. So we've got Councilor Senna, obviously, Councilor Pena, Councilor Benton, and Councilor Davis. So just want to make sure that we thank them as well for their work on this. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Councilor Senna.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you again, Mayor Keller. I think that even prior to even coming to council, this might have been an issue that even our mayor worked on, even when he was in the state legislature. I think that this is how long that this conversation has been going. We have so many community advocates on this call that really had been championing this and fighting for this for so long. And so for me to be able to carry this and amplify the voices in whatever language that everyone speaks and understands, or even does American Sign Language, it's really monumental for all of us. And I have the honor and privilege of championing the bill. Something else that we're also signing today is really near and dear to all of our hearts as well, is also our anti-Asian hate legislation to really address the ongoing issues, not just across the nation, but even in our own community. And I think that that's something important that we'll be continuing to discuss, and making sure that our community has all of the resources, not just in language access, but us as a community and as a city stepping forward to help our communities really bridge that gap and address a lot of the injustice that we've seen. I also want to recognize so many folks that couldn't be here today. I know that, of course, with COVID, and some of our surging numbers, we've been really able to accommodate folks by going virtually. But I just want to take this time to also recognize some orgs that, of course, are also on holiday break, but New Mexico Center Law and Poverty could not make it here today, but I want to just recognize them and their work. Not just within the city, but also in the legislature trying to get this passed at the state. which will really transition onto some of our state legislators who are also on this call to really thank them for their ongoing work. And we hope that this signing will also be kind of a pathway to also have it passed at the state. I want to recognize, of course, all of our community members who have had to navigate the systems, whether or not it was before my coming to council or even the mayor's. I think that this conversation has been so long, and this time is really a time to celebrate for all of us as a community. And I know that both pieces of legislation will also be translated and disseminated to all of these groups as part of our commitment towards language access, and to also address a lot of the anti-Asian hate that we've also seen in our communities. So with that, I don't want to take up too much time, because of course this came from community. I just had the honor and privilege to carry it on. I know that Hung Nguyen at New Mexico Asian Family Center, I know that we have the executive director of NMAFC here to speak on that, but I did want to recognize her ongoing work. Berenice Pompa, also at NML CLP, who's also worked on this. I know that we have also folks from El Centro on this call, Jasmine Irazoqui Ruiz at City Legal, who helped draft this legislation at the city side, but I know that she also worked on this prior to coming to the city. I know I'm leaving out a lot more folks that of course worked on this and couldn't be here today, but I just want to be sure to recognize the folks that have been championing this for quite some time. So with that, I'll give it back to Danielle to pass it on through the monumental step of signing the legislation into law.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, we're going to pause on the speaking for just a second and actually get these bills signed. So look at Mayor Keller for that.
Okay, it's always a little less climactic when it's virtual, but fun nonetheless. And by the way, we usually have a nice tradition that we have signing pens available. And so Danielle can get you one of those if you want. But I'm just going to hold up the legislation so folks can, oh, look at that. So wait, hold on. We're going to use the magic here. You guys get to see my my background, which I think if my kids still, they might have put some stuffed animals out. Let's see here. But I think to sign this properly. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, there we are. The Care Bears are still there. So anyway, here's the legislation. And so we can go ahead and sign that right now today. And so this one, and the date is 27th. All right. And so this one is the language access bill. And of course, we had this by executive order before, and now we have it, of course, by ordinance, thanks to the great work of everyone that Lan mentioned. And so, Danielle, do you want me to do the other one now as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. So as our city councilor mentioned too, we have, unfortunately, as a country and in New Mexico, experienced Asian hate in lots of forms and lots of times in our history, but most recently, of course, with respect to COVID. And so this is a particularly timely and important piece of legislation, and something, again, that I know our State Senator Cedillo Lopez is on, as well as others, our Commissioner Barboa. We hope now is a good time to echo these at different parts of government to stand up against hate. And I also know that our Office of Equity and Inclusion is wonderfully in place. We put it in place 4 years ago to essentially sort of enforce and adhere to both of these pieces of ordinance. And so, not only are we able to kind of do this legislatively, but we're able to do it operationally thanks to that office and the team that's there. So with that, I'll go ahead and sign the second piece right there. And we will make this also the law of the land in the city of Albuquerque. All right, so congratulations, counselors and advocates. And very special to be able to sign these with each of you today. Go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you. I am going to hand it back over to Councillor Sena to introduce her guests who worked with her really closely on getting this moved past. So Councillor Sena, show is yours.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And as was stated, so many worked on both pieces of legislation. I'm very grateful to the mayor, to his administration and folks from the city who really pressed on, and even through the holiday break, to really get this organized, but also working on this piece of legislation in regards to the Asian hate bill. We had a rally out back in May, I believe. And since then, we've been really working with our Asian American Pacific Islander community in addressing not just the hate that we have seen, but also what can we be doing better. And so the language access piece was most critical, going hand in hand with both of these legislations. So I just want to recognize that. But I'm going to be turning it out to a representative who's also been working on this well before she became a representative, and in step with our community to really address some of the inequities that we've seen when it came to language access. So without further ado, this is Representative Kaebon Ku.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sena. Thank you, Mayor Keller, and thank you everybody on this call who has been so instrumental to this fight. I feel like it's been decades of work to try and pass this on multiple levels in different ways, and to see you all today during this really historic signing into ordinance and making it codified into the city. I just feel so much appreciation for everybody and just have so much respect for all the work that you all do on the ground and in the different positions you're in. I remember when I was at Asian Family Center and when Senator Tidia Lopez was at Enlace Comunitario, we were really fighting this battle around language access and how we were seeing our victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault show up at our agencies, and the struggles they were having in just getting fair and equitable services, and how they were being treated by law enforcement and through the different services and resources that they were trying to navigate as they were experiencing something so incredibly tragic and difficult for themselves and their families. And to make that push on the ground and really have it come from the groundswell of community who have been fighting for this for so long, to say we need this to make it right for our families, for that to be the story on the ground for such a long time, and to finally have the right people in power at the right moment in time to see this really across the finish line. Again, I just have so much pride in that, in knowing that this came from our families. This came from individuals who are really experiencing the impact of not having access to language services on the ground day to day. And really, this is to honor their voices. And I hope that in practice, we'll see more people who can really get what they need to in order to have thriving lives. So this to me is, again, such a huge thing, and I'm just so thankful for everybody who got it across the finish line. I think the senator and myself also have some work to do on the state level in championing this through the state legislation, and I know we've got some language access bills that we're hoping to push forward, along with also even just recognition of Asian Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian communities across the state via statute, so that again we really can recognize those in our communities who have been here for generations, and not only their contributions that we can see tangibly, but really just being human and having the value of people living here day to day, the respect that needs to have within law, I think is tremendous. So I won't take up too much more time, but I just want to say I am again so grateful for this amount of work that happened to get it through, and for all the folks on the ground. And I'm looking at all of your wonderful faces on the screen now. Just so grateful to be in your presence and the work that you all have done. So Councillor Sena, I'll pass it back.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I also want to recognize the Representative Patricia Roybal Caballero, who's also been championing this as well at the state legislature. I know that she couldn't be here today, but I do want to honor and recognize her work as well. We're going to turn it over to Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, who's also been championing this at the state legislature and in the Senate. So, Senator.
Thank you so much, Councillor Sen. I'm so excited and grateful to you and your leadership and the council's leadership and the mayor's leadership to make this happen at the city level. It's particularly meaningful. I actually wrote a poem about this once because my mother's tongue is not my mother's tongue. And that's what the loss of language leads to, is it leads to trying to rediscover. I speak Spanish, but my mother was really focused on, my mother and father really focused on protecting us by not teaching us to speak Spanish first. They used to speak Spanish when they didn't want us to know what was going on, which is how I learned how to speak Spanish, to be honest with you. But the big problems are language access is a human right. There is no reason that anybody should be denied services or healthcare or anything else because the government doesn't provide language access. It's a human right. And to see it in operationalized at the city level is an absolute inspiration, and it's going to help us get it through at the state level. I just know it. I want to thank Representative Bunca. She got me involved when I was at Enlace Comunitario. She was the head of Asian Family Services and got Enlace involved then. And so it was an honor to advocate for it as an advocate. And then I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Representative Bunca to get it across the line at the state level and provide the access that all people who speak languages other than English deserve in our multicultural state. So thank you. Without further ado, I just want to express my deepest appreciation to the mayor and to the leadership at the council level, particularly with Councillor Sena.
Thank you so much, Senator. I so appreciate that. And that really highlights also, what this language access bill speaks to is that, we have over 55,000 monolingual Spanish speakers here in the city of Albuquerque. If you haven't read the actual legislation, please do, as many of the whereas statements kind of breaks apart how blessed we are in our city, but also our state, because really our diversity is our strength. And really both pieces of legislation really speak to how us as a community need to come together to work with each other. We're going to also turn this over to Sachi Watase from New Mexico Asian Family Center. I know that they've also been instrumental in working on both pieces of legislation. So I'll bring it over to her.
Thank you, Councillor Sena, and thank you all. Thank you, Mayor Keller and your administration and everyone on the call today. I really appreciate being here. So as Councillor Sena mentioned, my name is Sachi Watase, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Mexico Asian Family Center. For a little background, our mission is to provide culturally sensitive programs and services, creating a Pan-Asian community that advocates for and supports itself. And back in 2006, the Asian Family Center was founded due to the recognition that these linguistically accessible services for Asian communities were not available to many of our communities, and that our communities as well had been historically underserved. And so now 15 years later, our daily work continues to address that systemic disparity, and by supporting families in accessing and navigating social and governmental resources, while simultaneously working to combat those barriers that our communities face within those systems. And so one of those main barriers that we so often see is language access when seeking public benefits. And that is a very, very common issue. And as you've heard others share, it deeply affects all of us, and it is a human right. And many New Mexicans' health and safety are unfortunately predefined by those inequitable barriers. And we know that language upholds culture and history, and as Senator Cedillo Lopez was sharing, and is a form of power, resilience, and self-determination for families across New Mexico. And we really do believe that everyone, including those who speak languages other than English, deserve to have the access to the resources intended to support them. So we know that passing this language access bill will hopefully ensure more New Mexicans their rights to public resources, alleviate small grassroots organizations like our own of the burden of being a catch-all to fill gaps in accessible services, and give informed decision-making power and agency back to New Mexicans. Our communities have asked for equitable language access, and so today we're thrilled to take this step and honor the voices that have spoken up and those who have also not been able to. We are honored to join you all today to witness and celebrate the signing of this historic and critical legislation. And just to also thank everyone who has worked so hard on these bills. I know that they're a product of true and meaningful support, commitment, and decades of work from the mayor's administration, our wonderful bill sponsors, a particular shout out to Councilor Sena, community-based organizations and advocates, my predecessor and ancestors, our state senators and representatives. And again, I would like to particularly thank and shout out Representative Boncua, Representative Roybal Caballero, Senator Cydia Lopez, and Senator Mimi Stewart, and many others who have helped as well in the statewide language access efforts. And of course, the generations of Asian individuals, families, and communities, and our allies across New Mexico who have worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork to help us get us here today. We believe and deeply hope that New Mexicans of all and any descent will be one step closer to equity, safety, and justice with both of these new laws. Thank you so much for this work and support and for having me here today.
Thank you so much to our Executive Director at New Mexico Asian Family Center, Sachi Watase. Next up, we actually have a member of El Centro, and I want to just recognize Fabiola Landeros. I'll hand it over to her in a minute, but I just want to recognize that throughout the pandemic, we actually had to really gear up. Even though we're doing this on Zoom, we had to also do town halls in multiple languages, having done so in 7 different languages, but the technology barrier was a challenge. And I will say that folks at El Centro, even from our Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, prior to Mariela going to the director of our new Community Safety Department, her work in really helping and navigating the language access barriers. We partnered with El Centro and called each other back and forth to make sure that whatever tips we knew and how to really work Zoom to stream it across 3 different platforms while also simultaneously answering questions in any language that was given to us, whether through social media or through our Zoom chat. El Centro was really pivotal in helping us really bridge that gap. So I'll turn it over to Fabiola.
Thank you, Councilor Sena, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Keller, for having me today. And as I just want to say that we are proud to stand with Councilor Sena, Mayor Keller, in support of this important language justice resolution. And we want to recognize the leadership of the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Office of Immigrants and Refugee Affairs, as well as many partners as Enlace Comunitario, NMILC, New Mexico Asian Families, to take CLP, to take the lead and do this for our communities. We know this is one more example to bring immigrant-friendly and one Albuquerque into practice by ensuring that Albuquerqueños have the opportunity to participate in the civic and cultural fabric of the city that we all call home, and fully contribute. This is also important for our community because it's an important step for public safety to ensure that the victims and the witness can report crime. Those who are experienced discrimination can come forward, and that's something that anyone will be able to do it now without being the fear that they're not going to be understood, that they're not going to be able to fight for what they need. My first language is Spanish, and I'm proud to speak Spanish, to teach my kids Spanish. That is my language. But at the same time, I'm proud to live in Albuquerque and New Mexico and to see that this is a state that really fight for our people, for our community. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Fabiola. In my view, I always knew that being a public servant, I wasn't here to give voice to the voiceless, but rather to amplify the voices that have always been here. I'm very proud to do so in any language that anyone speaks. I know that of our top languages, besides Spanish, Dene, Vietnamese, we have so many languages within the city, I think over 1,000, that we're blessed here in the city of Albuquerque that we speak, whether it's spoken, written, or signed. So very grateful for that. Next up, we're going to actually turn this over to also Crystal Ciarza through our Asian Business Collaborative. We're going to be speaking more towards the Asian hate legislation and kind of what we as a community have really done to step up for each other, and what else we need to be doing for our community. So Crystal.
Thanks, Councilor Sena, Mayor Keller, Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, Representative Kevon Kua, to the Office of OEI and Partners and Friends and Community. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. My name is Crystal Ciarza. I'm the Volunteer Executive Director of the Asian Business Collaborative. And for the last year and a half, we've been assisting Asian-owned businesses with services and guidance on business challenges in New Mexico and here in the Southwest. Our API NH-owned businesses have shown that they have needed us, especially during this challenging time. Our motto is prosperity with a cultural competency lens. These pieces of legislation, including the anti-hate legislation, are absolute examples of having a sisterhood and a brotherhood in community and culture. And so thank you to everybody for making this happen. This bill in particular, after reading it, the piece that really speaks very strongly to me is that this bill is, and I quote, affirming its commitment to the safety and well-being of citizens, non-citizens, and visitors with ancestry from the Asia Pacific region, and in combating racist acts targeting AAPIs. This bill and the language access bill resonates very deeply within the Asian business community, especially since we've identified with both offices, the OEI office and the economic development team, that language access and Asian hate have caused major issues for doing business here in Albuquerque. So when they say that it is a challenge to take social justice and economic development and put the two together, this is an example of working together to make it happen. I will take an excerpt from the script that I had from the rally before, and I hope that I can leave you all with this today, which is: we as business owners of API and H descent will not tolerate the broken glass that you see from a terrible act of vandalism. We will not tolerate a racial slur that makes us feel ashamed by the look of our eyes and the color of our skin. And we will not fear that our businesses will be shut down because of money, because of crime, and because of racism. So thank you all so very much. And congratulations to Councilor Sena and all of us in community for making this legislation happen.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you for really your leadership and advocacy in our Asian business community. And I know that that will be an ongoing thing. And we're very fortunate to have you to have that bridge between community and also our city. Next up, we have Rusty Chan from the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. He's the national secretary and the local president. Rusty?
Thank you, Councilor Sena. We are grateful to you and the other city councilors and Mayor Keller for taking this historic and necessary step in protecting the citizens of Asian descent in our city. Perpetrators of crime against the Asian American community must be held accountable. Perpetrators who seek to deprive us of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness need to be held accountable. And bills, ordinances, and laws that do just that have been a long time coming. We welcome the initiative of this council and this mayor to undertake this mission. We are not independent of the hate and vitriol that goes on across our nation. We are interdependent, and we have seen hatred and division come here in the past against Asian Americans, so heinous as to have been enshrined in our state's constitution and local covenants. This bill signed today goes a long way to hold the line, correct the wrongs, and build a foundation for a safer and better Albuquerque. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Rusty, and truly thank you for your leadership and taking us back to also the work that we've had to do and continue to need to do, whether it's in the legislature and addressing a lot of our covenants within our own city, but also really highlighting what we had to do when it came to our Constitution. So thank you. I appreciate you for that. I believe we have our Director of our Office of Equity and Inclusion, Michelle Melendez, who's also been instrumental, a great partner of mine at City Council. And she also really worked through the holidays, worked through a lot of the technical challenges to get a lot of the legislations done, a lot of the translations done, holding each department, of course, accountable to when it came to language access plans. So I'm very grateful to her and her leadership and all of her staff at OEI. So Director Melendez.
Thank you, Councillor Sena. And I just want to add my thanks to the representative and the senator for your leadership as well. But really, my thanks has to go to the staff who are doing the work day in and day out. And thanks to Mayor Keller's leadership by passing that executive order earlier this year, we have a good head start on implementing this legislation. And we really put it into high gear during the early part of the pandemic when it became 100% clear. It was always clear, but it became irrefutable that everybody in our city needed access to PPE, to COVID information, to emergency rental assistance, to emergency food. And so that became our common rallying cry. And we really thank you, Councillor Sena, for bringing it all the way through so that it won't depend on a pandemic to get good language access. It should be part of our way of doing business as a city. And so our role is to continue to help every department. And I'm really thankful to hear that every department is on the way to implementing this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we close up, also want to mention we have some members of our ADA Advisory Council joining us virtually today. So just want to thank them for all of the work that they do to help the city make sure that everything is accessible to everyone who lives here. So with that, I think we'll hand it back to Mayor Keller for some closing remarks.
Sure. Well, thank you so much to everyone who joined us today and those wonderful and powerful remarks. It's also, something just to highlight that this particular configuration of leadership is a long time coming. The fact that we have an Asian American counselor and an Asian American representative is awesome. And again, it's something we should have had up for a long time ago. But I also just want to take a moment to celebrate both Lan and Kay and for what they've done in public service. And I know the first of many, many to come. Now, I would also just say that, for us, the fight continues, whether it's different venues of government or whether it's how to make sure that we stand up for these two pieces of legislation in every way that we can. And also a Happy New Year to everyone. I know it's been a tough one, as was the last year. And so for the last several years, we've said the next year's got to be better than this year. But I think, at least from a city perspective, I'm also proud to live in Albuquerque. I think this is one area where we shine, and I'm grateful that we're an immigrant-friendly city, and also to each of you for helping us make that happen over the last decade and over the last month, years and days and everything in between when we have to stand up for that policy.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I think we can wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining us.